My 18th birthday wasn't supposed to end like this. I woke up that morning thinking it would be ordinary. Maybe a small cake from the kitchen staff if they remembered. Maybe a passing acknowledgement from my father if he wasn't too busy with his new wife and her perfect daughter. I'd learned not to expect much after my mother died 6 years ago and father remarried within a year. Victoria, my stepmother, had made it clear from day one I was an inconvenience, a reminder of the woman who'd come before her, and Celestine, her daughter, was everything I wasn't: beautiful, graceful, adored by everyone in our provincial town. But that morning, something felt different. Before you continue with this story, I need to ask you something. Where are you right now? What city, what country, and what time is it where you are? I'm curious because this story, my story, happened at midnight in a world that exists parallel to yours. Drop your location and time in the comments, and if you're intrigued by what happened to me on my 18th birthday, hit that subscribe button, like this video, share it with someone who loves dark romance and impossible choices. Turn on notifications because you won't want to miss what comes next. Now, back to that morning. Victoria came to my room personally. That alone should have been my first warning. She never came to my room. She preferred to pretend I didn't exist unless absolutely necessary. "Alara," she said, her voice honey-sweet in a way that made my skin crawl. "I have wonderful news." I set down the book I'd been reading and looked at her warily. Victoria's version of wonderful news usually meant something terrible for me and something advantageous for Celestine. "The Vampire King's emissary arrived last night," she continued, stepping into my small room like she owned it, which, technically, she did. Everything in this house belonged to her now, including my father's will. "They're looking for a bride." My blood ran cold. Everyone knew about the Vampire King. Lord Thorn, they called him. The Crippled King, cursed and dangerous, ruling from his fortress in the northern mountains, where humans rarely ventured, and even fewer returned from. But what nobody knew was why Victoria was telling me this with that particular smile on her face. "The arrangement has already been made," Victoria said, circling my room like a predator. "Your father and I have agreed. You'll be presented to the emissary tonight." I stood up so fast my chair fell backward. "What? No, father would never." "Your father," she interrupted, her voice sharp now, "will do whatever I tell him to do. You know that as well as I do." She was right. I did know. Father had become a shadow of himself after mother died. Victoria had slipped into the void left behind and filled it with her own ambitions, her own desires. He'd stopped fighting her years ago. "The king requested a daughter of noble blood from our province," Victoria continued. "The honor could have gone to any family, but I made sure it came to ours." "Then send Celestine," I said, my voice sharper than I'd intended. "She's your daughter. She's the one you actually care about." Victoria's laugh was cold. "Send my Celestine to that monster, to live in darkness with a crippled vampire who hasn't been seen in public for decades. Don't be absurd." And there it was, the truth I'd always known, but she'd never spoken so plainly. I wasn't her daughter. I was expendable. "You should be grateful," she said, moving toward the door. "At least you'll be a queen. That's more than you'd ever achieve staying here." "I won't go," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my own voice. "You can't make me." Victoria paused at the doorway and looked back at me with something close to pity. "But not quite. The contract has been signed, Alara. The blood price has been paid. If you don't go willingly, they'll come and take you by force, and trust me, you don't want to see what happens to those who break a vampire contract." She left me standing there, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. I had until midnight, 12 hours to figure out how to escape a fate that had already been decided for me. But escape to where? And how do you run from creatures who can smell your fear from miles away? I didn't expect Celestine to visit me that afternoon. We'd never been close. How could we be? She was everything Victoria wanted, and I was everything Victoria wanted to forget. But when she knocked softly on my door an hour before sunset, I was too numb to send her away. "I'm sorry," she said, standing in the doorway like she was afraid to come in. "I didn't know Mother was going to do this." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Didn't you? Or did you just not care until you realized it could have been you?" Celestine flinched. "That's not fair." "Fair." I stood up, anger finally breaking through the shock. "You want to talk about fair? You've had everything, Celestine." "Our father's love. Your mother's protection. every opportunity, every advantage. And now, when it's finally your turn to sacrifice something, your mother trades me instead. I said I'm sorry, she whispered, and to my surprise, there were actual tears in her eyes. If I could change it. But you can't, I interrupted, and you won't, because changing it would mean offering yourself in my place, and we both know you're not going to do that. The silence between us stretched like a chasm. What's he like? I finally asked, my voice quieter now. The Vampire King. Have you heard anything beyond the rumors? Celestine hesitated. They say he was cursed 20 years ago, during the Great War between vampires and humans. They say he can't walk, can't even leave his throne room. That's why he needs a bride to be brought to him. Why does a crippled vampire need a bride at all? I don't know, Celestine admitted, but Mother said the emissary offered enough gold to clear all of Father's debts and secure our family's position for generations. She said it was a generous offer. Of course it was generous. They were buying a living sacrifice. There's something else, Celestine said, her voice dropping to barely a whisper. The emissary said the king specifically requested someone with your coloring. Dark hair, pale skin, gray eyes. Mother didn't tell you that part. My stomach dropped. He asked for me specifically, not by name, but by description. Mother realized you fit perfectly and saw her opportunity. So this wasn't random chance. Somehow, the Vampire King had described me before he'd ever seen me. The question was, why? I want to pause here and ask you something. Are you still with me? Have you subscribed yet? Because what happens next, what the emissary tells me when he arrives, is going to change everything you think you know about this story. Hit that like button if you're invested in my survival. Share this with someone who needs a story to get lost in tonight. And tell me in the comments, would you go willingly to save your family, or would you run? The emissary arrived precisely at sunset. I dressed in the gown Victoria had sent to my room, deep burgundy silk that made my pale skin look almost translucent. She'd also sent jewelry, though I refused to wear it. I wouldn't make myself beautiful for a monster, even if that monster was supposed to be my future husband. Father couldn't even look at me when I came downstairs. He stood by the fireplace, his face gray, his hands shaking slightly. For a moment I wanted to scream at him, to ask him how he could do this to his own daughter, to the child of the woman he'd claimed to love. But what would be the point? Victoria had already won. The emissary was nothing like I'd expected. He was young, or at least appeared young, which meant nothing with vampires. Tall, with silver hair and eyes like chips of ice. He wore black from head to toe, and when he entered the room, the temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Miss Alara Thornwood," he said, his voice smooth as glass. "I am Silas, first emissary to His Majesty, King Thorn of the Northern Mountains. I've come to escort you to your new home." "She's ready," Victoria said quickly, before I could speak. "We've prepared everything for her journey." Silas's cold eyes moved to Victoria, and I saw her actually take a step back. "I wasn't speaking to you," he said quietly. Then he turned to me, and I felt the full weight of his attention. It was like being examined by something ancient and hungry. "Do you come willingly, Miss Thornwood?" "Does it matter?" I asked, finding my voice. A ghost of a smile crossed his lips. "It matters to him. Him, the king. If I say no, then I will take you anyway," Silas said simply. "But the king prefers willing brides. It makes the bonding easier." Bonding. This was the first I'd heard of any bonding. Victoria made a small noise of distress, but Silas ignored her. "Did they not tell you?" he asked, studying my face. "The king doesn't simply want a wife, Miss Thornwood. He needs a blood bond, a connection that will share his curse and possibly break it. You're saying I'm not just marrying him. I'm binding myself to whatever cursed him." "Yes." The room spun slightly. This was so much worse than I'd thought. "And if I refuse?" Silas tilted his head. "The contract has been signed. Blood has been given. If you refuse, the debt falls to your family. All of them." I looked at my father, who still couldn't meet my eyes. At Victoria, who had the decency to look uncomfortable. At Celestine, who was crying silently by the window. "Then I suppose," I said slowly, "I don't have a choice." "There is always a choice, Miss Thornwood," Silas said, "but rarely an easy one." He extended his hand to me, and I realized this was it, the moment everything changed. Once I took his hand, once I walked out that door, I would never be the same Ilara who'd woken up this morning hoping for a simple birthday. I took his hand. It was ice cold. The carriage was unlike anything I'd seen before, black as midnight, pulled by horses that looked more shadow than substance. Inside, the seats were velvet, and the windows were tinted so dark I could barely see outside. It felt less like a carriage and more like a moving coffin. Silas sat across from me, silent and still as a statue. We'd been traveling for an hour before I finally worked up the courage to speak. "How long until we reach the fortress?" "3 days by carriage," he said without looking at me. "2 days if we push through the nights." "And will we push through the nights?" Now he did look at me, and there was something almost like amusement in his ice-chip eyes. "Are you in a hurry to meet your future husband, Miss Thornwood?" "I'm in a hurry to get this over with." He made a sound that might have been a laugh. "You're braver than I expected. Most brides cry for the entire journey." "Most brides weren't raised by Victoria Thornwood," I said. "Tears don't work on her. I learned that young." Silas studied me for a long moment. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "Someone more fragile." The king's description suggested delicacy. "How does he even know what I look like?" I asked. "That's what I don't understand." Celestine said he specifically requested my coloring. Silas's expression shifted into something I couldn't quite read. The king has his ways of knowing things, seeing things. Even trapped in his throne room, he sees more than most. "That's not an answer." "No," he agreed. "It's not." We fell back into silence. Outside, the landscape was changing. The gentle hills of my province were giving way to darker forests, steeper terrain. We were heading into vampire country now, where humans rarely went unless they had no choice. I must have dozed off despite my anxiety, because when I woke, it was fully dark outside, and Silas was watching me with an expression I couldn't read. "We're stopping for the night," he said. "There's an inn ahead that caters to travelers like us." "You mean vampires?" "And their human companions. You'll be safe there. The king's mark protects you." I looked down and noticed for the first time a faint shimmer on my wrist, like a tattoo made of moonlight. "When did this happen?" "The moment you took my hand. The contract is sealed now, Miss Thornwood. You belong to the king until the bond is complete or broken." "And how does it break?" Silas's smile was grim. "Death. His or yours." The inn was exactly as unsettling as I'd expected. It sat at a crossroads between 2 dark forests, 3 stories of weathered wood and flickering lights. A sign hung above the door, "The Crimson Rest," because of course it was called something like that. Silas helped me down from the carriage, a gentleman's gesture that felt wrong coming from someone who'd essentially kidnapped me, and led me inside. The common room fell silent when we entered. Vampires, at least a dozen of them, sitting at tables, drinking things that definitely weren't wine from their glasses. All of them turned to stare at me with varying degrees of hunger and curiosity. "She's marked," Silas said loudly, and I saw several of them relax slightly. "Anyone who touches her answers to King Thorn himself." We were shown to a room on the 3rd floor, 2 beds, 1 window, and a door that Silas locked from the inside. "You'll sleep here," he said, gesturing to one bed. "I'll take the other. Don't try to leave. The mark will burn if you get more than 50 feet from me." "You're joking." He held up his own wrist, where an identical shimmer glowed. "We're bound now, you and I, until I deliver you to the king. I'm responsible for your safety and your cooperation." I sat down heavily on the bed. "This keeps getting better." "You should eat," Silas said, pulling a wrapped package from his coat. "It's bread and cheese from your home. I'll order hot food sent up, but it will be different here. Best to start with something familiar." Despite everything, I was hungry. I hadn't eaten since breakfast, too nervous about the evening's events. I took the package and unwrapped it slowly. "Can I ask you something?" I said around a bite of bread. "You can ask. I may not answer." "Why does he need a bride?" "The king. If he's been cursed for 20 years, why now? Why me?" Silas was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "The curse is killing him, slowly but surely. The healers say he has perhaps 2 years left, maybe less, and a bride will save him. A blood bond might, if the bride is strong enough, if the connection is deep enough, if fate allows it. That's a lot of ifs." Yes, Silas agreed. It is. A knock at the door interrupted us. Silas answered it, and a pale girl, human, I thought, but her eyes had a glazed quality that suggested otherwise, brought in a tray of food, roasted meat, vegetables in some kind of dark sauce, bread that was almost black, and a glass of deep red liquid that I desperately hoped was wine. Eat, Silas said, settling into the chair by the window. Tomorrow will be harder. Why? Because tomorrow we enter the Shadowlands, and in the Shadowlands the normal rules don't apply. I wanted to ask what he meant, but the exhaustion was catching up with me. The stress of the day, the fear of what was coming, the reality that I was truly leaving everything I'd known behind. I ate mechanically, tasting nothing. Then I lay down on the bed, fully clothed, too afraid to undress with a vampire in the room. Miss Thornwood, Silas said from the darkness. Yes, for what it's worth, I'm sorry this is happening to you. I almost believed him. Before I continue, I need to know you're still here, still listening, still invested in what happens next, because tomorrow, when I enter the Shadowlands, everything I thought I knew about vampires, about curses, about myself, it's all going to shatter. Subscribe if you haven't already, like this video, share it, turn on notifications, and tell me in the comments, do you think the Vampire King is a monster? Or is there something more to this story? Your engagement keeps me going. Now, let me tell you about the Shadowlands. I woke to Silas shaking my shoulder gently. It's time, he said. We need to cross the veil before midday. The veil? The border between your world and the Shadowlands. It's easiest to cross at dawn or dusk, when the barriers are thinnest. I splashed water on my face from the basin provided, and tried to shake off the nightmares I'd had. Dreams of red eyes and cold hands, and a voice that whispered my name over and over. Downstairs, the common room was empty, except for the innkeeper, who watched us leave with eyes that glowed faintly in the dim light. Back in the carriage, I noticed the horses looked different, more solid somehow, more real. They change depending on which side of the veil we're on, Silas explained, seeing my gaze. In your world, they're barely there. In mine, they're as real as you are. And which side am I real on? He looked at me strangely. That's a better question than you know. We rode in silence for an hour, climbing higher into the mountains. The air grew colder, thinner. I wrapped my cloak tighter around myself. Then, suddenly, everything changed. One moment we were on a normal mountain road. The next, the air itself seemed to shimmer and split. The horses plunged through something that felt like a waterfall made of static electricity, and we were somewhere else. The Shadowlands. The sky was darker here, even though it was midday. The trees were taller, their leaves black as ink. The road was smooth as glass, and in the distance I could see lights floating through the forest like wandering stars. Don't stare at the lights, Silas warned. They're not stars, they're souls of those who got lost here. If you look too long, they'll try to lure you away. I jerked my gaze back to the interior of the carriage. How much farther to the fortress? We'll arrive by sunset. The king is eager to meet you. Has he said that? He doesn't need to say it. I can feel his anticipation through our bond. He's been waiting for you for a very long time, Miss Thornwood. But he's never met me, hasn't he? I turned to look at Silas fully. What does that mean? The king has been dreaming, Silas said carefully, for months now. Dreams of a girl with dark hair and gray eyes. Dreams that show him the future, or the past, or possibilities. He saw you, Miss Thornwood, long before your stepmother made her deal. My heart was pounding. That's not possible. In the Shadowlands, many impossible things are real. We rode on, and I watched the strange landscape pass by. There were buildings here, I realized. Homes built into the sides of mountains, markets where creatures I didn't recognize bartered with glowing coins, bridges that seemed to float in midair. Do humans live here? I asked. Some. Those who've bonded with vampires, those who've chosen this life, and some who had no choice, like you. Are they happy? Silas considered this. Some are. The king treats his people well, human and vampire alike. He's not the monster you've been told he is. Then what is he? Cursed, Silas said simply, and desperate, and more alone than anyone should ever be. Despite myself, I felt a flicker of something, not quite sympathy, but curiosity. What happened to him? How did he get cursed? That, Silas said, is his story to tell. But I will say this, the curse wasn't his fault. He was trying to save someone, and he paid a terrible price for his kindness. We were climbing now, the road spiraling up a massive mountain that seemed to touch the dark sky. And there, at the very top, I saw it, the fortress, black stone and silver spires, windows that glowed with cold blue light. It was beautiful and terrifying all at once, like a frozen star fallen to earth. Welcome, Silas said softly, to your new home. The fortress was larger inside than it appeared from outside. Corridors stretched in impossible directions. Staircases spiraled up and down in ways that defied geometry. And everywhere there were vampires, servants, guards, courtiers. All of them stopped to stare as Silas led me through the halls. The king is waiting, Silas said. We go directly to the throne room. Shouldn't I change first? Rest? He's been waiting for months, Miss Thornwood. He won't wait another hour. My stomach churned with anxiety. We climbed a final staircase and stopped before two massive doors carved with images of battles and fallen angels. Two guards stood on either side, their eyes glowing red in the shadows. Lady Alara Thornwood, Silas announced, bride to His Majesty, King Thorn. The doors swung open silently. The throne room was vast. The ceiling soared high above, lost in darkness. Pillars of black marble lined the sides, and at the far end, on a throne made of twisted silver and stone, sat the Vampire King. I couldn't see him clearly from this distance, just a silhouette, hunched and still. Approach, a voice said, and I realized it was coming from everywhere at once, deep and rough, like stone grinding against stone. Silas gave me a gentle push forward. I walked down the length of the throne room alone, my footsteps echoing in the silence. As I got closer, I began to make out details. The king's clothing was black and silver, expensive but worn. His hands gripped the arms of the throne, and I could see they were scarred, the fingers twisted slightly, but it was his face that made me stop breathing. He was young, impossibly young for someone cursed for 20 years. He looked perhaps 25, with sharp features and black hair that fell across his forehead. His eyes were the color of blood-soaked silver, and he was staring at me like I was the answer to every question he'd ever asked. Alara, he said, and hearing my name in that voice made something inside me shiver. You're real. You're not what I expected, I said, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. A bitter smile crossed his face. Because I'm not hideous. The curse is internal, not external. The damage is where you can't see it. He tried to stand, and I understood what Celestin had meant about him being crippled. His legs wouldn't support him. He made it halfway up before his face contorted in pain, and he collapsed back onto the throne. Forgive me, he said through gritted teeth. I wanted to greet you properly. You don't need to stand, I said quickly. I'm here. That's what matters, isn't it? Is it? He studied me with those strange eyes. You're here because you were traded, because you had no choice. I wanted you to come willingly. Would you have come willingly to this? I gestured around the throne room. To marry a stranger, to bind yourself to a curse. No, he admitted. I wouldn't have, which makes me a hypocrite for asking it of you. I hadn't expected honesty. I hadn't expected him to be human, despite being a vampire. Why me? I asked. That's what I need to know. Why did you describe me to your emissary before you'd ever seen me? Thorn leaned back against his throne, exhaustion evident in every line of his body. Because I've been dreaming of you for 6 months, he said. Every night, the same dreams. You, walking through gardens I've never seen. You, reading books in a sunlit room. You, crying at a grave I assume was your mother's. You, looking out a window on your 18th birthday, wondering if anyone would remember. My breath caught. That's not possible. The curse gave me something in exchange for what it took, he said. I see things, possible futures, probable pasts. And you, Alara Thornwood, I've seen you in every possible timeline, in every version of the future I might have. You're always there. That doesn't make sense. No, he agreed. It doesn't, but it's the truth. I've been waiting for you, searching for you. And when I finally found your province, your family, I knew you were the one I'd been dreaming of. And if I'm not, I asked, if I'm not whatever you need me to be to break this curse. Thorn's expression was bleak. Then I die, and you're free to leave. The bond will break with my death. He said it so simply, like dying was nothing, like his life held no value. What if I want to break it now? I asked. The bond. What if I want to go home? Then I'll let you, Thorn said, and I heard the truth in it. I won't keep you prisoner, Ilara. You have 3 days. 3 days to decide if you'll stay and bond with me, or if you'll leave and let fate take its course. 3 days to decide if you live or die. Yes, that's not fair. Nothing about this is fair, he said, but it's all I have to offer. I stood there, looking at this vampire king who was supposed to be a monster, and saw only a man trapped by something he didn't choose. A man who'd been alone for 20 years. A man who was giving me a choice when he could have just forced the bond. I need to think, I said finally. Of course, Silas will show you to your chambers. You'll have everything you need. And Ilara? I turned back at the door. Thank you, Thorn said, for coming, for giving me a chance. Even if you decide to leave, it's more than I deserve. My chambers were in the West Tower. 3 rooms, a bedroom with a massive 4-poster bed, a sitting room with more books than I'd ever seen outside a library, and a bathing room with a tub large enough to swim in. The king wanted you to be comfortable, Silas said, lighting candles throughout the rooms. If you need anything, pull that cord and a servant will come. Will they be human or vampire? Both. The king employs many humans who've chosen to live here. You're not as alone as you think. After Silas left, I collapsed onto the bed and tried to process everything. The king wasn't what I'd expected. He was young, handsome, and more importantly, he was giving me a choice, real agency in a situation where I'd had none. But that made it harder, not easier, because now I had to actually decide. 3 days to choose between my freedom and a stranger's life. 3 days to figure out if I could bind myself to someone I didn't know, share a curse I didn't understand, and potentially spend the rest of my life in the Shadowlands. A knock at the door interrupted my spiral of thoughts. Come in, I called, expecting Silas or perhaps a servant. Instead, a young woman entered. She was human, with warm brown skin and kind eyes. Lady Ilara, I'm Mira. I've been assigned as your lady's maid, if that's all right with you. I've never had a lady's maid, I admitted. Mira smiled. Then we'll figure it out together. I brought dinner. The king thought you might prefer to eat in your rooms tonight, rather than join him in the dining hall. She set down a tray, laden with food that actually looked and smelled normal: roasted chicken, vegetables, fresh bread, and what appeared to be honest-to-goodness apple pie. The king remembers what it's like to eat human food, Mira explained, seeing my relief. He makes sure the kitchens are well stocked. He eats food. I thought vampires only drank blood. We need blood to survive, Mira said, then caught herself. I mean, they need blood. I'm human, but vampires can eat food for pleasure, even if it doesn't nourish them. The king used to love meals before the curse. Now he can't keep anything down except blood. It's one of the things the curse took from him. I picked at the chicken. How long have you been here? 5 years. I came when I was 16. My family sold me to pay debts, similar to you. And you stayed. The king offered me a choice after the first year, Mira said, sitting down across from me in a way that suggested we were equals here. I could leave with enough gold to support myself, or I could stay and work for fair wages. I chose to stay. Why? Mira considered this. Because out there, I was nothing, a commodity. Here, I'm valued. The king treats his people well. Human or vampire, we're all equal in his fortress. And, she hesitated. And, I think he's lonely. I think he's been lonely for a very long time, and someone should choose to stay with him, not because they're forced to, but because they want to. Is that why you stayed? For him? No, Mira said honestly. I stayed for me, but I'm glad I did. This place, it's fairer than the world outside. Kinder, in some ways. We talked for another hour. Mira told me about the fortress, about the other staff, about the king's daily routines, how he spent hours in the library reading, how he managed the affairs of his kingdom from his throne room because he couldn't walk through his own halls, how he'd stopped hosting gatherings or entertaining visitors because he was ashamed of his condition. He wasn't always like this, Mira said, as she prepared to leave. I've seen portraits from before the curse. He used to smile. He used to dance. Now he just exists. Waiting. Waiting for what? For you, apparently, Mira said.
He's been different since the dream started. More hopeful, more alive, and now that you're here, Lady Alara, I'm not going to tell you what to decide, but I will say this, give him a chance, talk to him, know him before you choose. After she left, I lay in bed, unable to sleep. 3 days seemed both too long and not long enough. I found him in the library the next morning. I hadn't meant to. I'd been exploring the fortress, trying to understand my potential future home, when I heard the sound of pages turning. The library was 3 stories tall, with spiral staircases connecting the levels and windows that somehow let in sunlight, despite being in the Shadowlands. Thorn sat in a chair by one of the windows, a book open in his lap. He'd managed to get there somehow. There was a
Kane leaning against the chair, but he looked exhausted from the effort. "You don't have to hide," he said without looking up. "I heard you coming 5 minutes ago." Vampire hearing, one of the few benefits of the curse. He closed the book and looked at me. In the sunlight, he looked even younger, vulnerable. "Did you sleep?" "Not much." "You?" "Vampires don't sleep, not like humans do. We rest, but we're always partially aware." I moved closer, studying the books surrounding us. "Mira said you spend a lot of time here. Reading is one of the few pleasures I have left." Thorn said, "I can't dance, can't ride, can't even walk through my own gardens, but I can read, I can learn, I can imagine being someone else for a while." "What are you reading now?" He held up the book. It was poetry, human poetry, from before the Great War. "My mother used to read these to me," he said softly, "before she died. Before everything changed." "How did she die?" "The Great War. She was human, like you. My father was vampire nobility. Their marriage was controversial. When the war broke out, she was caught in the middle, killed by humans who thought she'd betrayed them by loving a vampire." "I'm sorry," Thorn shrugged, but I could see the pain in his eyes. "It was a long time ago, 23 years. I was only 5, and the curse happened 3 years later. You've been doing math. I'm trying to understand." He studied me for a long moment. "What do you want to know?" "Everything," I said, surprising myself. "I have 3 days to decide if I'm going to bind my life to yours. I should at least know who you are." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Fair enough. Ask me anything." I sat down in the chair across from him. "Start with the curse. What happened?" Thorn leaned back, his eyes distant. "There was a girl, human. She'd been captured by one of my father's rivals, another vampire lord, who believed humans were nothing more than food. She was being tortured, experimented on. I'd heard rumors and decided to investigate." "Alone?" "Foolishly. Yes. I was young, arrogant. I thought I could save everyone. I broke into the rival lord's fortress, freed the girl, and fought my way out." "That sounds heroic." "It was stupid," Thorn corrected, "because the girl wasn't just any human. She was a witch's daughter, and the witch had put a protection spell on her that would curse anyone who shed blood on her behalf." I felt my heart sink. "You fought for her. I killed 3 vampires to save her, and the moment the 3rd one fell, the curse activated. The witch appeared. She'd been watching the whole time, and told me my punishment. I would be crippled, unable to defend myself or others, unable to be the warrior I'd trained my whole life to be, and I would die slowly unless I found someone willing to share the curse with me. A blood bond. Yes, someone who would love me enough to take on half the curse, someone who would choose me, not because they were forced to, but because they wanted to. And in 20 years no one has?" Thorn's laugh was bitter. "Would you? If you had an actual choice? I'm a crippled vampire who can barely leave his throne. I have nothing to offer except pain and a shortened life. You have this fortress, this kingdom, people who seem to care about you, people who pity me," he corrected. "It's not the same." We sat in silence for a moment. "The girl you saved," I asked. "What happened to her?" "She thanked me. Then she left with her mother, and I never saw her again. She's probably dead now. Humans don't live as long as vampires." "Do you regret it? Saving her?" Thorn looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something fierce in his eyes. "No, she deserved to be saved. Even if it cost me everything, she deserved freedom. I'd do it again." And I realized something in that moment. This vampire king wasn't a monster. He was someone who'd sacrificed everything for a stranger, someone who'd been punished for his compassion, someone who might deserve saving himself. That night, I dreamed of Thorn. Not a nightmare.
something stranger. I was in a garden, walking between roses that glowed with inner light, and Thorn was there, but different. He was standing, moving freely, laughing at something I'd said. "This is what I dream," he said, even though I knew I was the one dreaming. "Every night, you and me, in a world where the curse doesn't exist." "This isn't real," I said. "No, but it could be. If you stay, if you bond with me, the curse would split between us. You'd take on some of the pain, but I'd gain some of your strength. We'd balance each other. I'd be crippled too. Not physically. The curse manifests differently for everyone. For you, the witch said it would be different. She said you're special." "I'm not special." "You are," he said, moving closer. "You're the girl I've been dreaming of, the one who can save me, or the one who'll watch me die. Either way, you're my fate."
I woke up gasping, my heart racing, and I knew somehow that it hadn't been just a dream. Thorn had been there with me, sharing the dream, showing me what could be. Before we go any further, I need to pause. We're at the midpoint of this story, and I need to know you're still with me. Have you subscribed yet? Have you hit that like button? Share this video with someone who loves impossible romance and dark fantasy. Turn on notifications, tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is, and tell me, would you bond with him? Would you save the Vampire King? I spent the second day avoiding Thorn. I explored the fortress, talked to the staff, tried to imagine what my life would be like if I stayed. Mira introduced me to other humans who worked there. A cook named Thomas, who'd been there for 12 years, a librarian named Sarah, who'd come willingly to catalog the king's massive collection, a gardener named Old Peter, who'd known Thorn since he was a boy. They all had the same message. The king was a good man, cursed by bad fortune. He deserved happiness. He deserved someone who would choose him. But did I want to be that someone? On the evening of the second day, Silas found me in the gardens. "The king wants to see you," he said. In the throne room, my stomach twisted. "Is it time? Has he made a decision?" "No, but I think he wants to ask you something." Thorn was waiting on his throne, looking more tired than I'd seen him. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his hands trembled slightly. "You're getting worse," I said, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. "The curse is accelerating," he admitted. "Knowing you're here, knowing the bond is so close but uncertain, it's putting strain on the magic. Witch curses are like that. They feed on hope and despair equally. What did you want to ask me?" He took a breath. "I want to release you from the 3 days. You can leave now, tonight, with my blessing. Silas will take you back to your family, with enough gold to live comfortably. You'll never have to think about me or this place again." I stared at him. "Why?" "Because I saw the way you were talking to my staff today, asking about life here, trying to imagine yourself staying, and I realized I was putting you in an impossible position, making you responsible for my life or death. It's not fair. You said nothing about this was fair. It's not, but I can make it less unfair. I can let you go. And if I want to stay." Thorn's eyes widened. "Do you?" "I don't know," I said honestly, "but I know I don't want to leave without understanding what I'd be giving up, or what I'd be gaining." "Then stay for the full 3 days," he said. "But know that you're free to leave at any point. The choice is always yours." I looked at this Vampire King, who was offering me freedom when he desperately needed me to stay, who was putting my well-being above his own survival, and I made a decision. "Show me," I said. "Show me what the bond would be like. Let me understand what I'd be choosing." Thorn hesitated. "It's intimate. Showing you would mean opening my mind completely. You'd see everything. My memories, my pain, my hopes, all of it. I want to know." He held out his hand. "Then come here." I walked to the throne and took his hand, and the world exploded into light and sensation and memory. I saw everything. Thorn as a child, watching his mother read poetry, the joy on her face when she looked at him, the day she died, and his father's grief that turned to rage, growing up feeling responsible for bridging the gap between humans and vampires, trying to prove that coexistence was possible, the night he saved the witch's daughter, fighting with everything he had, believing he was doing the right thing, the moment the curse hit, and he collapsed, his legs refusing to work, the pain that never ended, 20 years of loneliness, of watching his court pity him, of becoming a ghost in his own kingdom, and then, 6 months ago, the dreams of me, seeing my face, hearing my voice,
watching me live my life, unaware that somewhere in the Shadowlands, a vampire king was falling in love with someone he'd never met. "This is what you saw?" I asked, our minds still connected. "Every night," he said. "You, Alara. Always you. And if I bond with you, what happens? We share everything. The curse splits between us. You'd feel some of my pain, but I'd feel your strength. We'd be connected for life. What I feel, you'd feel. My thoughts would sometimes bleed into yours. We'd never truly be alone again. And the curse, would it break? The witch said a bond of true love could break it. But love can't be forced. It has to grow naturally. So even if you bond with me now, the curse might not break unless you come to love me. Truly." I pulled back slightly, still holding his hand. "That's a big ask. I know. I barely know you. I know that too." I looked at him, really looked at him.
Saw past the vampire, past the king, past the curse. Saw someone who'd been alone for 2 decades, someone who'd sacrificed everything for a stranger, someone who'd given me freedom when he could have forced the bond. "I need to be honest with you," I said. "I don't love you. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I also don't want to leave." Thorn's grip on my hand tightened. "Why?" "Because in 2 days, I felt more alive here than I ever did in my father's house. Because you've treated me with more respect than my own family ever did. Because when I look at you, I don't see a monster. I see someone who deserves a chance. Pity isn't love." "It's not pity," I said. "It's possibility. I'm not bonding with you to save your life, Thorn. I'm doing it because I want to know what could happen if I stayed. If I gave us a real chance. And if the curse doesn't break, if I die anyway, then at least you won't die alone. And at least I'll have tried." Thorn stared at me like I'd just offered him the sun. "You're serious? You're actually choosing this?" "I'm choosing to try," I corrected. "I'm not promising love. I'm not promising forever. But I am promising to stay and see where this goes. That's more than I ever dared to hope for." He stood then, shakily, using the throne for support. And before I could ask what he was doing, he pulled me close and kissed me. It was soft, gentle, almost hesitant, like he was afraid I'd pull away. I didn't. When we broke apart, I could feel something changing, a warmth spreading through my chest, connecting to him, the bond beginning to form. "Last chance to run," Thorn whispered against my forehead. "I'm done running," I said, and we bonded. The bond was nothing like I'd expected. It didn't hurt. Instead, it felt like falling into warm water, like coming home after a long journey. I felt Thorn's presence in my mind, not intruding, but there, constant and comforting, and I felt his pain. Not all of it, thankfully, but enough to understand what he'd been living with for 20 years. A constant ache in his legs, a weakness in his core, a fatigue that never ended. But something else happened too. As I took on some of his curse, he gained some of my strength. I watched as he straightened, his legs supporting him more firmly than they had moments before. The pain in his eyes eased slightly. His breathing came easier. "Alara," he said, wonder in his voice. "I can feel you, your heartbeat, your thoughts, your hope, and I can feel you," I said. "Your determination, your loneliness, your relief that I'm here." We stood there in the throne room, connected in a way I'd never been connected to anyone, and I realized something profound. I wasn't alone anymore, and neither was he. Silas appeared at the doorway, took one look at us, and smiled. "The bond is complete." "Yes," Thorn said, not taking his eyes off me. "Should I prepare for a wedding?" "Eventually," Thorn said. "For now, we're just learning each other." Over the next few days, that's exactly what we did. We talked for hours in the library. We shared meals. He'd started being able to eat small amounts of food again, a side effect of the bond. We walked through the gardens, slowly, with him leaning on me for support when his legs got tired, and every night, we shared dreams. Beautiful, impossible dreams, where the curse didn't exist, and we could dance under stars made of diamond light. I started to understand him, his dry humor, his love of poetry, his fierce protectiveness of anyone weaker than himself, his guilt over not being able to do more for his kingdom, and he started to understand me. My longing for a family who'd actually wanted me, my love of stories and quiet mornings, my stubborn refusal to give up even when things seemed impossible. The curse was still there. We could both feel it, lurking like a shadow,
But it was weaker now, divided between us. The witch had said true love could break it. I wasn't sure we were there yet, but I thought maybe we could be, someday. 3 months later, I woke up to sunlight streaming through the windows. Real sunlight. Not the strange half-light of the Shadowlands, but actual, warm, golden sunshine. I sat up in bed, our bed now, mine and Thorne's, and stared in wonder. "It's breaking," Thorne said from the doorway. He was standing on his own, no cane, no support. The curse, I can feel it crumbling. How? He crossed the room and sat beside me, taking my hand. "Because I love you, and I hope, you might be starting to love me too." I turned to look at him. What gave me away? The way you smile when you think I'm not looking. The way you hold my hand even when I don't need support. The way you've made this fortress into a home instead of a prison. I laughed. "I do love you. I didn't mean to. I certainly didn't expect to. But somewhere between the library conversations and the shared dreams and you teaching me to dance even though your legs hurt,
I fell. I'd been in love with you since I first dreamed of you," Thorne admitted. "But I didn't dare tell you. I was afraid you'd feel obligated to love me back." "I don't do anything out of obligation," I said. "You should know that by now." He kissed me then, and I felt the curse shatter like glass. The bond remained, that connection between us would last forever. But the pain, the weakness, the slow death sentence, all of it broke apart and dissolved. When we finally broke apart, Thorne stood and walked to the window without any difficulty. "It's done," he said, his voice full of wonder. "I'm free. We're both free." I joined him at the window, and together we looked out at the Shadowlands, which seemed a little brighter now, a little more alive. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now," Thorne said, pulling me close, "we live. We rule this kingdom together. We prove that humans and vampires can coexist. We write our own story, not the one that was written for us." I like that plan. "There's one more thing," he said, pulling a ring from his pocket. "I've been carrying this around for weeks, waiting for the right moment. Ilara Thornwood, will you marry me? Not because you have to, not because of any curse or contract or obligation, but because you want to." I looked at the ring, silver set with a stone that seemed to hold captured starlight, and then at him. "Yes," I said, 1,000 times yes. We were married a month later, in a ceremony that brought together vampires and humans from across the realm. My father came, looking ashamed. Victoria and Celestine came too. Though they kept their distance, I no longer cared about their approval. I had Thorne, I had a kingdom that accepted me, and I had a future that I'd chosen for myself. The girl who'd been traded to spare her stepsister's fate had found something better than freedom. She'd found home. I was in the library when Silas found me, his face grave. "My queen," he said. "I still wasn't used to that title. There's a messenger from your province. He's requesting an immediate audience." I set down the book I'd been reading. "From my father, from your stepmother." Thorne appeared in the doorway behind Silas, having felt my sudden spike of anxiety through our bond. "What does Victoria want?" "I don't know," Silas said, "but the messenger says it's urgent, a matter of life and death." We received him in the throne room. Thorne sat on his throne, our throne now, with a second seat beside it that I'd only recently started using. I stood beside him, our hands linked, presenting a united front. The messenger was young, barely 20, and he looked terrified to be in a vampire fortress. He bowed so low his forehead nearly touched the floor. "Your Majesties," he stammered, "I bring a message from Lady Victoria Thornwood." "Speak," Thorne said, his voice cold in a way I rarely heard anymore. The messenger pulled out a sealed letter and handed it to Silas, who brought it to me. I broke the seal and read. Then I read it again, certain I must have misunderstood. "Alara." Thorne's concern bled through our bond. "What does it say?" I looked at him, then at the messenger. "It says that Celestine is dying, that she's contracted the wasting sickness and has perhaps 2 weeks to live. She's begging me to come home, to say goodbye."
"It's a trap," Thorne said immediately. "Probably," I agreed. "But what if it's not? What if Celestine really is dying?" "Would you care?" Silas asked bluntly. "After everything her mother did to you?" I thought about it. Celestine had never been cruel to me directly. She'd been passive, complicit in her mother's favoritism, but not actively malicious. And in that final conversation before I left, she'd shown genuine remorse. I don't know, I admitted, but I think I need to find out. Thorne stood, and I felt his protective instincts flare through our bond. Then we go together. If this is a trap, they'll have to deal with both of us. Your Majesty, the messenger said hesitantly. Lady Victoria specifically requested that Lady Alara come alone. She says the sight of vampires would upset Celestine in her weakened state. Absolutely not, Thorne said flatly. I'm not letting Alara walk into a potential trap alone. I'll take Sela's, I suggested, and a guard of 6, enough to protect me but not enough to seem like an invasion force. Thorne's jaw tightened. I don't like this. I know, but I can feel your concern through our bond, remember. If anything goes wrong, you'll know immediately. You can come for me. He was silent for a long moment, clearly wrestling with his protective instincts and his respect for my autonomy. 3 days, he finally said. You have 3 days to go, see what's happening, and return. If you're not back by then, I'm coming with an army. Fair enough. But as I prepared to leave the next morning, something nagged at me. A feeling I couldn't quite name, like I was forgetting something important. Something that would matter more than I could possibly know. The journey back to my province took 2 days. 2 days of watching the Shadowlands fade into normal countryside, of feeling the bond with Thorns stretch thin, but not break, of wondering what I would find when I arrived home. Home, it was strange to think of my father's house that way now. The fortress was home. Thorn was home. This place was just where I used to live. We arrived at sunset, and I was struck by how small everything seemed. The house I'd grown up in, which had once felt so large, now looked modest compared to the fortress. The grounds that had seemed expansive were actually quite limited. Or maybe I'd just grown. Victoria met me at the door. She'd aged in the 3 months since I'd seen her. There were lines around her eyes that hadn't been there before, and her hair had more gray threaded through it. Alara, she said, and there was something in her voice I'd never heard before, genuine emotion. Thank you for coming. Where is she? Upstairs, in her room. The healers say it won't be long now. I climbed the stairs with Sela's clothes behind me. Victoria had agreed to let him accompany me, though she'd made the other guards wait outside. Celestine's room had always been beautiful. Now it felt like a mausoleum. She lay in her bed, propped up on pillows, and the change in her was shocking. She'd lost weight dramatically. Her skin had a grayish tinge, her breathing was labored. But when she saw me, her eyes lit up. Alara, she whispered, you came. I moved to her bedside and took her hand. It was cold, fragile. Of course I came. I'm sorry, she said, tears sliding down her cheeks. For everything, for not standing up to Mother, for letting her trade you, for being a coward. Celestine. No, let me say this, please, I don't have much time. She coughed, and I saw blood on her lips. The wasting sickness was brutal. You deserved better, you always deserved better, and I should have told Mother to send me instead. I should have been brave like you. I wasn't brave, I said. I was terrified, I just didn't have a choice. But you made the best of it. Mother told me you're a queen now, that you married the vampire king and broke his curse, that you found love in the darkest place imaginable. I did. I'm glad, Celestine said. I'm glad something good came from Mother's cruelty, and I'm glad you came to say goodbye. We talked for an hour. Sela's stood guard at the door, giving us privacy but staying alert. Celestine told me about the months after I'd left, how guilt had eaten at her, how she'd tried to convince Victoria to let her visit me but had been refused. Mother was afraid you'd reject us, Celestine said, that you'd turn us away and she'd lose the connection to vampire royalty. Is that why she asked me to come, to maintain that connection? Celestine's expression became troubled. Partly, but there's something else, Alara, something she hasn't told you. And that's when I felt it through the bond. Thorn's sudden spike of alarm, his warning flooding into my mind. Trap, Alara, it's a trap. Get out now. I started to stand. but Celestine grabbed my wrist with surprising strength. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." The door burst open, and Victoria stood there with 3 men I didn't recognize. They wore the symbols of vampire hunters. "Now," Victoria said coldly. And everything went dark. I woke up in chains. Silver chains, specifically designed to block vampire magic. They wouldn't hurt me, I was human, but they severed my connection to Thorn. I couldn't feel him anymore, couldn't sense his thoughts or emotions. The panic that caused was almost worse than the physical restraints. I was in a cellar, damp, cold, lit by a single torch, and Victoria stood over me with an expression I'd seen before but never directed at me with such intensity. Hatred. "You're awake," she said. "Good, I want you conscious for this." "What are you doing?" I demanded, pulling at the chains. "Celestine, is she even really sick?" "Oh, she's sick," Victoria said. "Has been for 2 months, wasting sickness, just like I said. But what I didn't tell you is why she's sick." She pulled out a vial of dark liquid. "This is vampire venom, concentrated, poisoned, designed to slowly kill whoever ingests it. I've been giving it to Celestine in small doses for months." The horror of what she was saying hit me like a physical blow. "You've been poisoning your own daughter." "To draw you back here, yes. I knew you'd come for her. Knew that despite everything, you'd be too soft-hearted to let her die alone." "Why? What could you possibly gain from this?" Victoria's smile was cruel. "Vampire queens are valuable, Alara, especially ones bonded to a king who's recently broken a centuries-old curse. There are people who would pay fortunes for someone with your blood. Scientists who want to study how the bond works. Vampire hunters who want to use you as bait to draw out the king." "Thorn will come for me," I said, trying to sound confident despite my fear. "He'll destroy you." "I'm counting on it," Victoria said. "The vampire hunters have set traps throughout the property. Silver nets, blessed weapons. Everything needed to capture or kill a vampire king who's foolish enough to charge in without thinking. And based on the reports I've received, your husband is exactly that foolish when it comes to you." She was right. I could imagine Thorn's rage when he felt the bond sever. He'd come immediately, probably with a small force so he could move quickly. And he'd walk right into whatever trap Victoria and the hunters had prepared. "You'll never get away with this," I said. "Even if you capture Thorn, even if you somehow manage to kill him, the vampire kingdom will come for revenge. They'll burn this province to the ground." "Perhaps," Victoria agreed. "But I'll be long gone with more gold than I could spend in 3 lifetimes. And Celestine will be dead anyway, so what does it matter?" "You're a monster," I whispered. "I'm a survivor," Victoria corrected. "Something you never understood. I didn't claw my way up from poverty and obscurity to watch my position crumble. When your father's debts threatened everything, I made a deal. And now that that deal has made you valuable, I'm making another one." She turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and Alara, that touching goodbye scene with Celestine, she really did mean those apologies. She really does feel guilty. But she also really did agree to help me lure you here. Turns out even the dying can be manipulated if you promise them the right things." The door slammed shut, leaving me in darkness. I pulled at the chains, but they held firm. I tried to reach for Thorn through our bond, but the silver blocked everything. I was alone, truly alone, for the first time since we'd bonded. And somewhere above me, Victoria was preparing a trap for the vampire king who loved me. I had to find a way out, had to warn Thorn. But the chains held fast, and the cellar door was locked. And through the tiny barred window near the ceiling, I could see the sun beginning to set. Thorn would come at nightfall, and I had no way to stop him from walking into his own death. Unless I could find a way to break these chains before then. Unless I could remember something, anything, from the months with Thorn that might help me escape. The bond might be blocked, but I was still a vampire queen. And queens didn't give up. Not when the king they loved was riding into a trap designed to kill him. I closed my eyes and thought back to everything Thorn had taught me. About vampire magic. About bonds. about the ways power could flow even through silver if you knew the right channels. And in the darkness of that cellar, I began to understand something Victoria hadn't counted on. The bond wasn't just magical, it was deeper than that, written into the very fabric of who I was now. And silver could block magic, but it couldn't block love. I just had to figure out how to use that before sunset. The clock was ticking, and my husband was coming. Before I end this story, I have one final request. If you made it this far, if you stayed with me through all 15 chapters, you deserve my gratitude. Subscribe if you haven't already. Like this video. Share it with someone who needs to believe in second chances and impossible love stories. Turn on notifications for more stories like this. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? What time is it? And what did you think of my journey from unwanted stepdaughter to vampire queen? Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. And remember, sometimes the fate you're forced into becomes the destiny you choose. Good night.